What if I told you that a single verse from the Bible could be powerful enough to completely change someone's life? Imagine dedicating your entire life to preaching a certain belief, only to come across one scripture passage that shatters your foundation and forces you to question everything. Well, that's exactly what happened to one devoted Protestant pastor. A single moment of clarity, one verse, set him on a path that ultimately led him home to the Catholic Church. In today's video, we're going to explore this incredible conversion story. We'll look at the verse that caused him to rethink everything, why it had such a profound impact, and what happened next. Could this verse challenge your own understanding of faith? Could it do the same for someone you know? Stick around because this story might just surprise you. The journey of a devoted pastor. Meet Pastor John. For decades, he was a passionate and dedicated Protestant minister. He wasn't just a casual believer, he was committed to the core teachings of Protestantism, especially sola scriptura, the idea that the Bible alone is the sole authority for Christian belief and practice. He spent his life studying Scripture, teaching his congregation and rejecting what he believed to be man-made traditions, especially those of the Catholic Church. Like many Protestant pastors, John firmly believed that the Catholic Church had added unnecessary doctrines over the centuries, traditions that were not found in the Bible. He believed that the early church had been more like modern Protestant churches, focusing solely on Scripture without any authoritative tradition. And for years, he confidently taught this belief from the pulpit. But everything changed one evening. While preparing a sermon, he came across a Bible verse he had read countless times before. But this time, it hit differently. This verse didn't just challenge his theology, it completely upended his entire understanding of truth. Now, the verse that changed everything. So what was the verse that turned Pastor John's world upside down? It was 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15. If I am delayed, you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and foundation of the truth. Wait a minute, the church is the pillar and foundation of truth? Not the Bible alone? Pastor John was stunned. He had always believed that truth came from Scripture alone. Yet here was Scripture itself pointing to the church as the upholder of truth. This verse didn't just suggest that the church was important, it declared that the church itself was the foundation of truth. At first, he resisted. Could he have misunderstood? Was there another explanation? He turned to Protestant commentaries for answers, but the more he read, the more unsettled he became. Many Protestant theologians avoided discussing this verse in depth, and the explanations he found felt weak compared to the plain meaning of the text. For the first time in his life, his theological foundation was shaken. A deep dive into church history. This realization led Pastor John on a deeper journey. If the church was the pillar of truth, then which church was Paul referring to? Surely it couldn't be the thousands of fragmented Protestant denominations all teaching conflicting doctrines. Determined to find answers, he decided to go back to the beginning. To study the writings of the early church fathers, the first Christians who lived closest to the time of the apostles, what he found left him stunned. The early Christians weren't Protestant. They didn't believe in sola scriptura. They didn't see the Eucharist as just a symbol. Instead, they believed in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. They upheld apostolic succession, recognizing bishops as the successors of the apostles. They accepted both sacred scripture and sacred tradition as authoritative. The more he studied, the more undeniable it became. Modern Protestantism did not align with the beliefs and practices of the early church. Instead, it was the Catholic Church that had preserved the faith handed down by the apostles. He read the writings of St. Ignatius of Antioch, who in 110 AD referred to the church as Catholic. He saw that the early Christians celebrated the Eucharist as the true body and blood of Christ and recognized the authority of bishops. It was undeniable. The Catholic Church was the same church spoken of in 1 Timothy 3:15. But accepting this truth wasn't easy. If he embraced Catholicism, what would it cost him? The answer was everything. Pastor John faced pushback from his church, his friends, and even his own family. His congregation questioned him. Some accused him of betraying the faith. He wrestled with the consequences of losing his career, his livelihood, and the community he had built over the years. But deep down, he knew he couldn't ignore the truth. After months of prayer, study, and soul-searching, he made the decision to enter the Catholic Church. It was a difficult road, but it was one that led him to something far greater, the fullness of truth in the Church established by Christ himself. The power of the Eucharist. One of the most profound moments in his journey was his first encounter with the Eucharist. As a Protestant, he had always seen communion as a symbolic act, but now, standing before the Blessed Sacrament, he felt an overwhelming presence of Christ. The words of Jesus in John chapter 6, verse 53, "Unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you," took on a whole new meaning. This wasn't just a metaphor, it was real. Finding true Christian unity. Another major realization for Pastor John was the division within Protestantism. There were thousands of denominations, each with different interpretations of Scripture. He began to see that Jesus' prayer in John chapter 17, verse 21, that they may all be one, was only truly fulfilled in the Catholic Church, which had maintained unity in doctrine for over 2,000 years. The authority of the Papacy. One of the most difficult hurdles for Pastor John was the Catholic teaching on the Pope. However, as he delved deeper into history, he found that the role of Peter and his successors was evident from the earliest days of the Church. Matthew 16:18, where Jesus declares, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church," stood out to him. He realized that the papacy was not an invention of the Middle Ages, but a divinely established office that ensured unity and continuity in the Church. The importance of sacred tradition. Another revelation for Pastor John was the realization that Scripture was never meant to be interpreted in isolation. The early Church did not rely solely on written texts, but also on the oral teachings of the apostles, which became sacred tradition. He saw that 2 Thessalonians 2:15 confirmed this. "So then, brethren, stand firm and hold to the traditions which you were taught, whether by word of mouth or by letter from us." The Catholic Church had preserved these traditions faithfully, while Protestantism had rejected them. His message to other seekers. Now, Pastor John shares his story to help others searching for truth. He encourages people to read the early Church Fathers, study Scripture deeply, and pray for guidance, because, as he learned, truth is worth the journey. Pastor John's story is a powerful reminder that God's truth is always there for those who seek it. Sometimes it takes just one verse to open our eyes. But the journey doesn't stop there. Faith is a lifelong pursuit of truth. If you're searching for answers, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. Read Scripture, study church history, pray for guidance, because the same God who led Pastor John home is calling each of us deeper into his truth. And if you're still wondering whether the Catholic Church is the true church, remember this verse, the Church of the living God, the pillar and foundation of the truth. It's right there in the Bible. The only question left is, will you listen? If this video spoke to you, be sure to subscribe for more content like this. Check out my other videos on church history, the Bible, and conversion stories. Until next time, God bless and keep searching for the truth.